All right, Jeanette, thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for making the time to be here. My name is Ray Burchett, creator of Intuitive Development Training. And if you didn't read my bio, just some quick high points. Started out life as a CPA with Arthur Andersen for a couple of years in their small business audit and tax in Chicago. And I had the opportunity to transfer my analytical skills to trading and spent over 20 years in the S&P 500 pit from 83 through 2004. Got to see the world come to an end a couple times. First time was Black Monday, October 19th. The next time was 3 days later, that Thursday. Anyway, just crazy stuff to put in perspective. That Thursday we were trading a $5,000 tick. And so if you were trading a 10 lot, you were trading in $50,000 clumps. Anyway, traded through the big run-up in the bull in the mid-90s, bursting of the bubble on the floor for 9/11. Markets didn't open that day. It's in the pit when we reopened about a week later, and to this day, still one of the most emotional experiences of my life. So along the way, I've seen a lot in '97. I co-founded Local Knowledge, pioneered online trading technology, had that company for 7 years, and we had the lowest latency quote delivery in the industry. The only problem was our technology partner was so good they got bought out by a defense contractor, and that defense contractor didn't want to have anything to do with the trading world. So that put us out of business. And anyway, from those experiences, I really became aware of what mattered most in performance, and created Intuitive Development Training. And in 2011, the Department of Homeland Security found out what I was doing, and we're making good progress with them. The sequester hit and killed everything off. They came back in 2014 and 2015. I did a training for them and got recommended to the ODNI, which was Clapper at the time. And anyway, we have a couple proposals sitting with the DOD now. Have had the opportunity of training some pretty elite military folks and fighter pilots. So what I'm going to share with you today has basically been around since 2009. That's when I first deployed it. And the reason it's so effective is that it fills a gap that we're not aware of. And higher education, professional development, organizational training just don't address it. And they don't because they don't know how. And I was fortunate enough to come from a very competitive environment in public accounting, getting to witness multiple cultures, being out on audit engagements with multiple clients, and then going to the trading floor. And so if you look at the activity in the workplace as the volume button, it used to be the dial, now it's a button. But in that environment, even in busy season, volume might get up to somewhere between 3 and 4. On the trading floor, it starts at 7. And you can't even imagine the levels of volume that the market hits on days like Black Monday, and certainly the last couple of trading days have been pretty volatile too. You saw good volatility early this last month in February. So anyway, looking at those things, there was a huge difference at the speed of which information must be filtered, processed, and applied. So even if you're coming to trading from a pretty active work environment, you're probably still no better than a 3 or a 4, unless you're ex-military and worked on an aircraft carrier, flight deck, or certainly out on the battlefield. And I don't mean to slight anybody. I'm sure if you're a doc in the OR or a surgical nurse, or if you're an EMT or a policeman or a fireman, you certainly have those hyperdynamic environments as well. So, and I'm sure there's people that work in logistics that have a similar experience. I loaded trucks for UPS my last semester in high school. I only had to take one class, so I worked the midnight shift. And you can get a whole lot of stuff coming at you real fast if you have to keep up with, though you're just stacking boxes and trucks that's still checking zip codes and moving around. So unless you've had that experience, it's pretty tough to get your brain going fast enough to stay ahead of events. And that's really what's needed as a trader, to stay ahead of price movement. And so that's what this training does. And it's today I'm going to make you aware of the gap and really help you understand the benefit and need of filling it. And it's not only going to make you a better trader, it's also going to make you better at everything that you do. So bottom line, and I've got to do this disclaimer to keep the CFTC happy, trading futures, options on futures, and retail off-exchange foreign currency transactions involves substantial risk for loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not indicative of future results. So big picture, there is a ton of information out there, and Moore's Law, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, just keeps increasing the volume and speed of that information. And the only thing that we have to compete with, and our success is absolutely dependent upon, is our ability to get to good information, analyze it fast, and then make the most out of it, see and do before others. And it is our cognitive process that determines our ability to do that. It is not hardware. It is not software. It is not an application, okay? It is our own mental capacity to determine what's most relevant, to sort it out, and then put it to use. And that is the outcome, the solution. And so when you know how to build that process, everything gets better very fast. And so filling the gap does that. So the way things work for most people is that we accept and hold ourselves accountable to absolute performance truths. Aptitude, desire, commitment is a given. I'm assuming all of you want to trade. You're all willing to do the work, and you're here to get direction for how to do that work so you can be successful. So when I was in college and studying to become an accountant, earn my degree, it was GAAP, FASB, the tax code, had to demonstrate my subject matter mastery of that, and then again passing the CPA. So it was absolute performance truths that kept guiding me to the information that mattered most and preparing me to be effective as an accountant. So that validated me, and Arthur Andersen hired me, and they said, okay, we're going to teach you our best practices, and you're going to be successful as an accountant, as an auditor. And so that's the same for any profession. They all have their unique absolute performance truths. And you can kind of think of this as a linear development path. You know what is most relevant. You go every day, you get a little bit better at it, and a little bit better at it, and a little bit better at it. And so no one was aware of this gap. And I became aware of it, contrasting those behaviors from a traditional with that hyperdynamic work environment of the trading floor. And it's this gap that is the Achilles heel of traders. If you've spent any time trading at all, you understand that the two biggest challenges are having the patience to wait for the market to align with our strategy, and then the strong conviction to consistently execute once that alignment presents itself. And so it's really tough to overcome those things. And we're frustrated by them, but more often than not, we don't really understand why we're frustrated. And as a result, when we don't wait and we don't execute as intended, we give up the only advantages that we have. Does everybody get that? And again, I've got a tough time with facial expressions and body language over the internet, so if you guys can chime in, it helps me out. Okay, and thank you, Carmen, Brian, guys, for chiming in. So if we don't wait and we don't execute, we give up the only advantages we have. And when we fill this gap, we really understand those advantages. In other words, we trust ourselves. It gives us the energy we need to wait and the strong conviction to consistently execute. And so why traders give up that advantage is because they don't understand the power and construction of trust. And I'm going to pick that apart. So the biggest way to comprehend all of this is that it's all about trust. And our ego wants us to believe that we know everything that there is to know about truth and trust, right? We're all mature adults. We all have professional success. How much more could we possibly know about truth and trust? There's a boatload, and I can't even begin to get into it this morning. But I'm going to show you enough where you're going to begin to understand just how much more power is out there. And that likely whatever your current understanding is, it's only the tip of the iceberg. And when you have that power, you're going to understand your advantage. You're not going to give it up. You're going to have that energy to patiently wait, that strong conviction to consistently execute. When you fill this gap, it's not high performance, it's high intuitive function. Cindy asks, does Think or Swim work in the system? Any charting software that you use, it's fine. You don't have to change anything. I'm working at a foundational level that's going to help you sort out the information that you use much better. Let's just put it that way. So it doesn't matter what platform you're on. All right, so when we fill this gap, really powerful things happen. And I'm going to take you through that. And at the end, it's going to teach you how to build and earn trust most effectively. And that's the differentiator. That's what's going to give you the energy to really understand your advantage and not give it up. So here's the thing about change. You guys are here because you want to change something. You want to change your income profile, improve your earnings potential. Maybe you want to change your profession, transition into trading full-time. Maybe you're moving into retirement. You want something to occupy your mind. You know you want to be able to be productive, and you see trading as a way to do that and also benefit with income from that. But for whatever the reason, understand you've got to change something. Is everybody with me? To be successful, we've got to change something, okay? And change is the hardest thing to do, all right? Because what we end up doing is we look at something out at the horizon. We see our future self, right? We've got this vision, and we're chasing. And we want to be that guy or that woman, right? We want to have that freedom. We want to have that independence. We want to provide better for our children or grandchildren. Or I actually have a couple clients who are doing this, and their earnings are going to support overseas missions. And it's wonderful, whatever it is, okay? But you want to change something. So we're looking out at the horizon. We're seeing that future of what we want to be, right? And we are chasing it. And you know what? We're never going to get there unless we take a step back. And this is the key part. And again, our ego tells us we can control things that we can't, know things that we don't. So we're like the roadrunner or I should say we're like the coyote chasing the roadrunner out onto the horizon, and we don't know what we're doing. That's why the coyote keeps crashing and burning. So please understand, you got to take a step back. You got to understand where you're at, who you are, what your tools are, what your experience is, what your aptitude, desire, commitment, where it's really at. And then if you take that step back to get organized, now you're stretching that rubber band back because of all the awareness that you're creating by really developing a tangible understanding for where you're at, seeing the gaps. The more time you do that, the further back you stretch that rubber band. In other words, you're creating the energy that's needed to slingshot ahead of change, to stay ahead of price, to be prepared, to get to the best information, analyze it fast, and make the most out of it. Does everybody follow me on this? And unfortunately, most traders, they get sucked into all the shiny objects out there. Buy this system, or come to this program, or come and do this. And when it's green, buy. When it's red, sell. Or I'll send you my alerts. Or the software is going to light up and show you where the opportunity is. All you got to do is pay attention. Well, the problem is, sounds great. I'm sure the people that are doing it have the best of intentions, but there's no development of trust in that equation. So you have no chance of using it as intended. Where all the people that created that and are telling you about it, they trust it because they created it. They put in all the time and effort. So this webinar is going to make you much more aware of what cognitive power is. That's what fills the gap. That's what high intuitive function is. Why it's the determining factor for trading success, how to upgrade the components generating that cognitive power. You're going to take away the understanding to significantly improve how you filter, process, and apply information by minimizing risk for bias and how you perceive, comprehend, and project. Learn how to neutralize development, performance, risk defined by the 3 blind spots. I'm going to go through that in a little bit. Then you're going to develop tangible understanding for how you're accepting and holding yourself accountable to those absolutes which best practices are built on. And here's the thing, please listen very, very carefully. Tangible understanding is superior to the abstract concept of personal accountability, and why development, performance accelerate and improve so significantly. The things that, especially that I got back from the military folks, elite forces and pilots that have gone through this training, this was a huge piece for them. Tangible understanding of accountability. Warfighters hold themselves to an incredible standard of accountability for a whole bunch of different reasons. But when they went through this training, it gave them that tangible understanding for just how accountable they were. Gave them that much more conviction, that much more energy, that much more power, that much more clarity and focus. So why do we need that? Imagine each piece of dye in this image as a piece of information, and they're all simultaneously demanding our attention. Now I want you to imagine they're flying out at the screen at you at about 30, 40 miles an hour, right? And if you could somehow protect yourself, I want you to look out into that horizon, and you know what you would see? You'd see a wall of information becoming higher and deeper by the moment. It's inevitable. Rapidly advancing technology, ever increasing the volume and speed of information is creating that dynamic, not going to shut off. So we have two choices. We have to dramatically speed up and improve our ability to filter, process, and apply information, or we're going to get slammed. And most people are already getting slammed, and what's worse, they can't appreciate how bad they're getting slammed because their ego is telling them they can control things that they can't, know things that they don't. And they're getting buried so badly they have no chance of digging out. And it's all because of that gap. Traditional work environments characterize cycle of falling behind and catching up. That is now professional suicide. Hyperdynamic environments present so much information so fast, participants who cannot keep decisions ahead of real-time events become irrelevant. So the more dynamic your work environment prior to trading, the better prepared you'll be to keep pace. However, probability is high. You're still going to have to dramatically speed up and improve your ability to filter, process, and apply information. You're going to have to strengthen your cognitive power. That's what determines your ability to get to the best information, analyze it fast, make the most out of it. It's cognitive power, not IQ, that determines success. And the higher your intuitive function is, the stronger your cognitive power will be. And it's that high intuitive function that keeps decisions ahead of real-time events, price movement, and hyperdynamic environments. Intuitive function is the unconscious application of creativity and imagination, integrating skill, knowledge, and experience in a manner causing you to frequently realize and expand your potential. Please note the difference between intuitive function and instinctive behavior. They are two different things. Intuitive function is proactive behavior. It drives our evolution. It's the product of all our good work, learned and developed skill, knowledge, and experience. Instinctive behavior is reactive. Reactive. It's the unconscious application of behavior shared by a species necessary to its survival. It's part of our DNA. It's coded into us to keep us safe. So, intuitive function, proactive behavior, driving our evolution. Instinctive behavior, reactive, keeping us safe. What happens when we're overwhelmed by information? We become instinctive, reactive, we turtle. And unfortunately, we fall further behind. When we trust ourselves, we remain intuitive, proactive in our behavior. We maintain our future vision. We can see the gaps and fill them and just keep going. Does everybody get the difference between intuitive function and instinctive behavior? Again, chime in, because this is another huge piece. Most people just aren't aware of this. Thank you for chiming in. So again, just keep it simple. Intuitive function, proactive behavior. More proactive, more aware, more successful. Instinctive, reactive. We fall further behind. So all professionals are intuitive to some degree. The most effective achieve higher intuitive states. Again, it's all about seeing and doing before others, right? I don't care if we're an athlete, if we're an entrepreneur, if we're the guy in an organization, the person that's going to, or girl, the person that's going to get moved up is the one that has the greatest awareness, the one that's seeing and doing before others. Trading's no different. The ones that are most successful, furthest ahead of price, see and do before others, they're highly intuitive. So when we learn how to develop and support high intuitive function, we gain significant competitive advantage. You can get to a much better place in a short period of time. And it's not dependent upon IQ. You don't even need a high school diploma. All you need is the desire to better understand what works best and the commitment to change your behavior so you can do it. So if you're willing to take a step back, understand where you're at, see the gaps so you can be prepared to where you want to go, you can do this. So I'm going to give you a quick self-evaluation here. Bob asks, what are you selling in bottom line, sir, in all caps? Bob, what I'm selling is intuitive development to fill a gap that most people aren't aware of. When you fill that gap, you gain incredible competitive advantage because of how much faster you're able to filter, process, and apply information. All right, so copy this slide. You can take the time to answer the questions. How dynamic was your work environment compared to the information you process as a trader? How strongly do you feel about your ability to do that? And how confident are you in your ability to keep decisions ahead of price? I'm going to count down from 5 so you can capture this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the second part is, how do you neutralize the risk for bias in how you perceive, comprehend, and project information? How do you protect yourself from the 3 blind spots? And here's those 3 blind spots. Any one can be fatal. The first is the difference between what you believe you know and the actual depth of your knowledge, how you perceive your behavior and the reality of your conduct, and your inability to know how your behavior impacts the efforts of others. So count down from 5 to grab this slide. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So take the time to go through that, and you're going to take that first step back, if you will, to understand where you're at. Start pulling that rubber band back to slingshot yourself forward. So we've got to make it simple. Again, this sounds daunting, but when we fill that gap, we become like a missile just accelerating out into the horizon because we know the information that's most relevant to our objectives. We have such great conviction for it. And we're just eviscerating all the noise. We're locked in on what's most relevant. And as we keep going through this intuitive development, we keep becoming more efficient. We end up with continuous unconscious and accelerating improvement. We actually go from a natural learning and improvement progression to an exponential development path. Now this is one ugly picture now. I'm not the greatest artist in the world. Leon says, I don't understand. How does this help in trading? Leon, in trading, it is all about our capacity to filter, process, and apply information faster than the folks that we're competing against. And so we have to get this information ahead to get ahead. James asked, should I dispense with other trading psychology and emotion courses and take yours as a replacement? I hate the word psychology. And so I replace it with the science of trust. So and what I do, I don't get into, I'll just call it gobbledygook, as my good friend Bubba does. I just draw straight lines to the beliefs and behaviors that make it work. And what proof do I have that this works? Leon asks, you can go to my website, trust1st.com, and then when you click on the product description, which I'm going to give everyone access to at the end, you can read the 5-star reviews and see people in their own words why it works. So anyway, the weeds here, we can't even see the weeds, all right? And so we've got to clear those up. We've got to make them go away. So the simplest understanding for this training, again, we want to make it simple. We got to see the weeds, the stuff that's choking us off. We've got to pull them. We've got to make sure they don't grow back. So we're like that missile getting to the best information. Weeds slow us down. They create conflict. They choke out the energy we need to be our best. And what they're really doing is they're keeping us from improving fast enough to stay ahead of that rate of change. And because we can't improve fast enough, we don't have awareness for deceit, exploitation, lies, manipulation. We don't have the awareness to protect each other from unfair treatment, inconsistent application of policy, standards, law, favoritism, nepotism. In other words, all the things that give us more energy when we come to trading and reducing conflict. We want other people to protect us from those things as well. But again, we have to stay ahead of real-time events, have great awareness, or we're going to just get played. So earlier I said this all happens because we have a very incomplete understanding for the power and construction of trust. Again, our ego wants to tell us we know everything there is about trust. Now, I'd really like you to close your eyes and listen very carefully. All right? Close your eyes, listen very carefully, empty your brain. If our understanding for the power and construction of trust was complete, there would be no conflict. We would have realized our collective strengths. We would be sharing an abundance beyond our imagination, falling over ourselves as we help each other out. We'd be in paradise instead of burning up energy, our bandwidth, trying to figure out who, what, and when to trust. I'm going to say that again. If our understanding for the power and construction of trust were complete, there would be no conflict. We would have realized our collective strengths. We would be sharing abundance beyond our imagination as we fall over ourselves to help each other out. We would be in paradise instead of burning up energy trying to figure out who, what, and when to trust. When you get this tangible understanding for the power and construction of trust, everything changes. And again, it's our ego convincing us we can control things that we can't, know things that we don't. It shuts down our curiosity. We become the coyote chasing the roadrunner. What does the coyote do? He keeps going off to Acme for the latest, greatest technology, right? And so he just keeps taking technology, and he just ends up going off the cliff higher up and crashing with a bigger explosion. He doesn't have the awareness to get ahead of the roadrunner. He doesn't have the aptitude to do it. He needs to be doing something different. All right, you're here because you want to change. To achieve requires disruption. Does everybody get that? To change something, we've got to eliminate bad habits, bad behaviors, or we have to develop new ones and new skills, which requires disruption from what we're used to. It's normal and necessary. Doesn't make us a bad person because we have to change. It's normal and necessary. And the longer we put it off, the greater disruption it's going to require, the longer pain is going to be extended. And so no matter what we're doing, trading, business, whatever, the need to accelerate improvement is immediate. So even if you don't think you're going to do trading or not sure, what you learn from this is going to make you better in all your professional and non-professional endeavors. Next thing that we need to understand, full measured solutions are the only ones that work. Does everybody get that? I can't tell you how many times, well, gee, this would just be a great course if you could just knock it down to 2 hours. You can't change behavior in 2 hours. Does everybody get that? It's got to be a full measure. Ron's saying for every trade there's a winner and a loser. Someone on the other side of the trade wants to take your money. How do you develop trust when someone is trying to take away your livelihood? What that other person is doing is irrelevant other than recognizing their strengths and weaknesses and how to position your strengths against their weaknesses as a trader. And when you really understand what the trading proposition is, it's about supporting that risk management solution. And the more effectively we support that solution, the more we encourage participation in the market, and that's what drives intelligent risk that results in sustainable growth. So the best way to understand trading, when we're making a contribution, buying the market when it's oversold or selling it when it's overbought, we're rewarded. When we don't recognize the timing, when the market needs that support, the market takes our money saying, hey, Ray, I don't need you. So again, full measured solutions, and don't defend the status quo. Don't let your ego crush you. So this drastically accelerating rate of change requires us to make significant improvement. Now, this lays out the consequences of Moore's Law. We're going to do the math so you guys can understand just how fast things are changing. Gordon Moore co-founded Intel in 1968, and he noticed the number of chips or transistors fitting on a computer chip was doubling every year, and he hypothesized that computing power would double every 2 years, thus Moore's Law. Ray Kurzweil, who's the chief engineer for Google, looked at that and said, well, if computing power is doubling every 2 years, then so is the volume and speed of information. And he worked that out to prove that hypothesis. And he did the math and made his argument for singularity that at some point in the near future, and we're seeing that more and more with AI, that we're going to need humans, a chip on our head, to remain relevant, to interface with machines. And I don't think anybody wants that. Okay? So let's just do the math real quick. Though this doubling is argued to have begun in 68, let's just look at the year 2000. By 2000, I think it's very safe to assume that every professional was using a computer and the appropriate software, right? So we're going to start with the year 2000, and we're going to assign a value of 1 to represent the collective power of information and technology. So if you do the math and double it every 2 years, in 2016 we hit 256. In 2018 we're at 512. So just ask yourself, have you doubled your cognitive power since 2016? Can you filter, process, and apply information twice as fast today in your head that you could in 2016? Are you twice as good as getting to the information, analyzing it, making the most out of it as you were in 2016? How are you going to be twice as good by 2018? Or I should say 2020 when it's 1,024. And twice as good again by 2022 when it's 2,048. Now the exact progression can't be known, but I'm ultra conservative here, so it's probably faster than what I'm depicting. Does everybody see this? These are hard numbers. You want to understand why you're frustrated, why anxiety, why there's so much stress in the world? It's because we cannot improve fast enough. We haven't been taught how to improve fast enough to keep up, to stay ahead of it. And filling the gap teaches us how to improve fast enough. And here's the cool thing about filling the gap. we learn how to improve fast enough, we have the awareness to protect ourselves from being deceived, exploited, manipulated. We have the awareness to protect each other. So if you want to do something for your organization, your team, for those you care about most, best thing you can do is learn how to accelerate your improvements so you can stay ahead of the rate of change. And so again, Joseph says, Kurzweil wants us to merge with AI. Do we really want to do that? Heck no. And if I was not in a public forum, I'd probably be a little bit more profane. There's no way in God's green earth that anyone's ever putting a chip inside me anywhere. And so I'm fairly certain that the majority of you would have the same feelings, right? We don't want to give up our independence. We don't want anybody monkeying around in there. And I will tell you this, machines do not have a heart. They do not have a soul. They will never, ever, ever be as complex as what a human is capable of. And yes, they can process information, but please understand machines are processing history. Does everybody get that? Machines are processing history. Humans have imagination. They have the capacity to dream. They have passion and compassion. Machines do not have any of those things. And there's a whole other talk I could give on dynamics, human interaction. But bottom line, every one of us has a choice that we need to make right now. Are we going to take that step back, pull that rubber band back, look in the mirror, do what we need to do to see and fill the gaps so we can slingshot ourselves ahead of change? Because if we don't, if we let our ego get the best of us, telling us we can control things that we can't, know things that we don't, then again, just look at that example of trust. Our ego telling us we know all of this. And hopefully when I took you through that, if our understanding was complete, there would be no conflict. We would have realized our collective strengths. We would be sharing abundance beyond our imagination. We wouldn't be burning up our bandwidth trying to figure out who, what, and when to trust. All that would be energy. That's the cost of this gap. You fill the gap, incredible things happen. But you've got to take a step back. You've got to make an investment of time. And so our ego would have us believe that, yeah, we're solving the problem. I know how to code. I'm writing my own programs, or I'm really good at doing research on the internet, or I've got the best smartphone and I know how to make all great use out of it. In reality, folks, we are painting the barn when we think we believe we're painting the barn when we're actually painting the outhouse and doing a pretty bad job of it. Again, just look at all the stress, anxiety, frustration. Just spend how much time think about how much time you spend chasing the day instead of staying ahead of it. And again, because of that ego, we can't see the weeds. So we need new knowledge, methods, tools, metrics. We've got to learn how to fill that gap. And we learn how to fill that gap by learning how to develop and support high intuitive function, embracing the beliefs, assimilating the behaviors that make that happen. And it takes some time. But what we take away from that is a shared understanding for how to best direct and support improvement and performance. We take away the knowledge and tools to go from a linear to an exponential development path, to neutralize the consequences of Moore's law. And why is that happening? Because now when we have these beliefs and behaviors that best develop and support high intuitive function, we have the knowledge, the understanding to minimize the risk for bias in how we perceive, comprehend, and project information. We don't sabotage ourselves because of bias. Does everybody get that? That bias is how we self-sabotage. And to make matters worse, cultural messaging is intentionally creating a boatload of bias to control us. And I can't even get into that conversation, but I do in the training. So not only do we gain that awareness to minimize risk for bias, we gain the awareness through those beliefs and behaviors that neutralize development and performance risk. Difference between what we believe we know and the depth of our knowledge. Difference between how we perceive our behavior and the reality of our conduct. Our inability to know how our behavior impacts the efforts of others. All of that gets neutralized because now we are working this intuitive development process that has us unconsciously, continuously running in an internal inventory looking for the gaps. And then our process, the intuitive development process, not only is it unconsciously and continuously looking for them, it's also filling them. And the reason why all of that is happening is we're gaining a tangible understanding for how we're accepting and holding ourselves accountable to those absolute performance truths. Again, for me as a CPA, it's GAAP, FASB, the tax code, right? And then I'm accountable to those things. I trust myself. That gets me outside of myself to develop the awareness to create best practices that give me an advantage in the marketplace. And I was fortunate enough that Anderson taught me their best practices, so that really had a slingshot effect, right? I was very fortunate. But I didn't have a tangible understanding for accountability. That's why I struggled my first 18 months as a trader. I didn't see that gap. I was focused everything at the functional level, where and when price is going to go, right? That's the question we need to answer, where and when price is going to go. That's all at the functional level. So I'm figuring out, how to do technical analysis, trying to figure out, everything I can about the Fed and really understand their power and all the other fundamentals impacting the market. I was painting the outhouse instead of the barn. The barn is that gap, those beliefs and behaviors that create that high awareness to discern the best information, analyze it fast, and apply it best. And once I started filling that gap, everything changed for me as a trader. Because now I had a tangible understanding for the work that mattered most. And when we have that, we go from a linear to an exponential development path. Now they can send as much information as they want. And man, we want them to just send so much because we know that we can handle it, that we're going to get through it. Our process, we understand it. It's getting better all the time. And we keep doing better. I'll give a countdown here so you guys can capture this slide. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Leon asks, which is best, technical analysis or fundamental? they both are very, very important. Okay. In other words, we can have technical things that alert us to weakness in the market, and then we can have fundamental things that can impact the market when it's strong. And so we have to, there's a happy balance between the two. And that's, in my advanced training, that's one of the things that I'm with my clients every morning from 8 to 8:30, live online, creating that balance. So anyway, I want to tell you guys how to fill this gap. So when it happens, we end up building this internal engine that optimizes decision making and execution. This is what I teach folks how to do. And I've got it obfuscated because it would just be confusion without the instruction. And when we fill this gap, we see the weeds, pull the weeds, we make them possible to grow. So this is basic training. And this is what I am encouraging all of you to do as soon as possible. It's phase 1 and 2 are 6.5 hours of on-demand instruction. It's broken out into 9 modules. Takes about 12 to 16 hours of homework. You can do it over the weekend or in the evenings in about a week's time. You'll take away the knowledge and tools to build, take care of, add horsepower to that cognitive engine, optimizing decision-making and execution. You'll have pulled that rubber band back and have the understanding and tools to slingshot ahead of change. Again, you can do it over a weekend or in the evenings in about a week's time. Now, once you complete phase 1 and 2, phase 3 starts. It's a 90-day reflection cycle. This is all available through my learning management system. And I'll pull that up. I've got about 3 minutes here till 10 o'clock. I'll pull that up so you can see that before we finish up. But this 90-day reflection cycle through the learning management system, each weekday for 12 weeks, you get a reflection that provides highly targeted direction and guidance so you can tune that engine to your specific development performance needs. So you get through basic training, you're going to fill the gap, you're going to know how to build and earn trust most effectively. You're going to have that energy to patiently wait, that strong conviction to consistently execute. You're going to know who you are as a trader, the advantages you have gained so well that you will not give them up. You will wait, you will execute. So you can write this down. I'm sure Jeanette will post it. It's trust1st.com/thirsty.html. And I'm just going to take a moment here and pull up the LMS so you can see what that looks like. So this is a dashboard that you'll have. Once you come in, there's the 9 modules. You can learn at your own pace. You have access for a full year. You can go back and repeat, and my students repeat multiple times. I've had folks that have gone through this training with me live online 3-4 times and have come as far as Dubai and Hong Kong and from all over the U.S. to do the training live with me just because they keep getting more and more out of it. So again, I'm happy to answer questions. You can email me with questions. Jeanette knows how to get a hold of me. You go to the Thirsty page on my website. I'll pull that up so you guys know what it looks like. And most importantly, there's a $200 coupon, so you can save $200. Steve asked, do I still trade? Off and on. About 80% of my time and effort away from my clients is taking this training into corporate America and to the Department of Defense. So I've got my plate full with that. So the coupon you can see here is Thirsty. It's Thirsty 200. Increase the size of my screen here so you guys can see it. So it's real easy. You can get started right now. It's trust1st.com /thirsty.html.